Welcome back to our Malfo troubleshooting admin series, and we're now on module 2 where we're going to look at some tools. I'm really excited about this session, Andy, because we're going to drill into some of the tools and see how a support escalation engineer handles himself around some of these tools. So I'm really looking forward to looking at some of these tools. So with that, let's get started with tools to troubleshoot Malflow issues. So in this lesson, we're going to look at the various tools. We're going to look at some of the tools that you have on your machine, tools that is available online, and so on, to help you assess all those different scenarios and also see, get to the bottom of those issues and help you gain insight into what's really happening with the various components inside of Exchange Online Protection and Office 365 in general. And a lot of these things will actually apply to people in general when they do troubleshooting of Office 365 and Malflow issues. So I think the very first important tool that we need to cover is DNS. So DNS is one of those very important Exchange dependencies. I heard you say the other day that Exchange runs on other things, and can you just elaborate to the audience how do you see DNS fit into the Exchange world?
Okay. Whenever I go through trainings, when I train people on Exchange, whether it be Exchange Online or Exchange on-premise, your standard Exchange installations, I always repeat to our administrators that Exchange is built on top of Active Directory. Active Directory is built on top of DNS, which is built on top of networking. So therefore, those are sort of the building blocks of your Exchange environment. So obviously, if DNS isn't working right or Active Directory isn't working right, then you can't expect the highest level, which is Exchange, to be working right. So that's why it's always good to go to the basics. Always go to the bottom. Make sure that networking is working right, making sure your DNS is working right, and then making sure AD is working right, and then obviously then you can start troubleshooting the Exchange servers itself. So yes, so go right into troubleshooting. We're going to kind of go past the most basic levels. We're going to assume that your network is working correctly. We're going to assume that you're able to ping, you're able to get internet connectivity, you're able to open up a web browser, and you're able to browse the internet. So obviously, if you can't do those things, it's no use in troubleshooting Malflow. We need to figure out why I can't get to the internet, why I can't open up my web browser and go to, for instance, Bing.com or Microsoft.com. Once we get those out of the way, then yes, then we can start troubleshooting DNS.
Okay. So when a user is unable to send a mail to somebody else, usually that ends up in a scenario where they receive a NDR, a non-delivery report, and then there could be an explanation in that message that says it's unable to find the domain on the other side. So, and that prompts you to go into DNS and to look at the DNS settings of the domain that you're trying to send to. Can you show us, so what do we typically see when we crack up the DNS and we see what's inside of that and how it's configured?
Right. Okay. So let's go ahead and this is where the rubber meets the road. So yes, let's frame it up a little bit. You're stating that we have an issue. We're able to look at the NDR and we believe that DNS is an issue. So let's go ahead. If we take a look at my screen, what we want to do is we want to open up a command prompt. So I'll go ahead and go right here to the command prompt. And inside the command prompt, like I stated earlier, one of our best tools is going to be, outside of ping, obviously, is going to be NSLOOKUP. So using NSLOOKUP, if you spell it right, we'll go right into NSLOOKUP. We want to just check and see if the MX records are set up right. So in order to do that, what you want to do is you're going to have to set the type. Because by itself, the NSLOOKUP is going to be looking up A records, right? So, for instance, if we look at the A record from Microsoft.com, this is what the computer would go to. This is the IP address the computer would go to. I usually like to do a quick edit. That way I can mark things easily. Right here, we looked for the A record for Microsoft.com, and then we got this. So your computer, even though you're trying to get to Microsoft.com, the computer is actually trying to get to this address. But again, that's only for A record. A record is used for web browsing, for instance. Well, we want to, we want to tell Edis Lookup that we're looking for something different, and in this case, we want to do that by doing set type equals MX. Okay, obviously we're not looking for A records, we're looking for MX records. So in the MX record, here we can also now start typing in the domains that we want to go to. For instance, we want to go to Microsoft.com. And at Microsoft.com, sometimes you get this, and this is stating that this is going out to the Microsoft name server, and it's just not returning the MX record. Now, there could be many reasons for this, and just depends on how the DNS is set up here. So instead of using Microsoft.com, because we're internal right now, it is not set to respond to with the MX record. What I want to do is use my test tenant. So my test tenant here is going to be 2c517.info. Okay, if we use 2c517.info, we can see here that in my test tenant, what I have here is I have two MX records set up. So let's go through the basics of MX records, right? So the very first thing for MX records is going to be a preference. A preference is going to determine which MX record is going to return, okay? Your preference can be anywhere from 0 to 100. 0 being the highest, being if it's 0, it's going to return that first. If the lower preference, for instance, any 10 in this case, fails, it cannot connect to 10, then it's going to go ahead and return to 20. Okay. If you have two preferences that are the same, let's say both of these were 10, then your DNS server, this DNS server specifically that I'm going to, is going to return this one. If this was 10, it's going to return this one first. The next time somebody asks, it's going to return the next one. The next time somebody asks, is going to go to the next one, and then over and over again. This is what we call round robin. There's definitely some scenarios where we want to use round robin. Depending on design, depending on how you plan your environment, you want to use round robin. You would make sure that your preferences are set the same, 10 and 10. You can have 5 records that are set to 10, for instance, and it's just going to round robin through to 5. In this example, though, since we have two instances where you have MX record is 10 and then 20, it's going to return this and only this, and will only return this one if the first one failed, if it cannot connect to this one. Okay, so and then the next time somebody asks, it's going to return this one again. It's going to keep on returning this until this one starts to fail. Okay, so that's what the MS preference is going to be. The next thing is, then it's just going to be what it's going to return. It's usually going to return the record that you are trying to connect to. So in this case, it's going to go to mail.2c517.info. So just for insight into this environment, this is my on-premise environment. So I have a hybrid environment. So the email is going to go to my on-premise, and if it's a cloud mailbox, and then it will, via the outbound connector, we'll forward it to a cloud mailbox. Okay. This will not come into play unless, again, this fails. Okay. And again, what the email server would do, it would set type to MX. As we see right here, it's going to determine that any mail that's destined for for instance demo A at 2c517.info, it's going to find out the MX record, it's going to send it to this record, and it's going to go back to acting like a computer. It's going to go back to the A record, and then it's going to say, okay, well, what is, because it needs numbers, right? Computers work with numbers, not the names, and it's going to finally go to here. At that point in time, then it's going to try to telnet and connect to this this IP address via port 25, and just to see what that looks like. Finally, to send mail to, for instance, to demo at 2c517.info, it's going to send to here. It finds out this is the address, so therefore that connection is going to look like so. Oops, I could put that actually there, or that is the same as this. Either one, it doesn't really matter. But what does matter is I'm going to use port 25. Port 25 is the port to do mail delivery. If I do that, the key here is not necessarily what the banner looks like, because there's different parts of the banner. It could be many different things. The key here is that you do get some kind of 200 or 220 return, and you do get something what we call here as the banner. Okay, the banner will also say, you know, what the time on the server is going to be. Okay, and this is in PST. Okay, so we break out of this. To break out of this, you would control open square bracket and then quit. Okay, so again, going back to NS lookup, we want to do a little bit more into that. I want to show a little bit more of how we can use NS lookup. So let's say I did do, I'm looking for the MX record for 2C517.info, and let's say it's not failing here, but let's say it does fail. Okay, there's two things that we can, you know, in our decision tree. We can either say that, you know what, it failed because it was never set up. Well, let's say it's a company that's been around for a long time and they've been using email for a while, and we know that their email works. But when we do a set type, and let's say this failed, it could be that the email, the DNS server that I'm using is failing. Okay, how do we determine that? So let me exit out of here real quick. I want to go find another DNS server to use. So let's look at my DNS config. And in my config, I can see that I have another DNS server. So let me use this DNS server. You can see here this .92. If we do a NS lookup, by default, it will always use the .92, the first DNS server that my client has set up.
The primary. Yeah.
The primary, yes. So let's say I do a set type, and let's pretend that it failed here. Let's pretend that it failed here, but I don't think that it's because it wasn't set up. Let's say I know it was set up. So what you can do is you can change your DNS server, and you do that by doing server, and then putting the IP address of the DNS server you want to use. This has nothing to do with 2C517.info. It just has to be another DNS server. Okay. At this point in time, you put that name in there, you hit enter, and now what's happening is now it's going to use this DNS server to do lookups. Now my client, which is the machine I'm on, is going to go here instead of here to look for information. Now let's say I want to look for 2C517.info, and of course I know it's going to be the same because it's already been, you know, the internet already replicated this record, and this fails. So for instance, if I go to this server and it's failed, let's say, and here it's not failing, so let's say it did fail, but I go to another DNS server and it passes, chances are either A, it was just created and replication hasn't finished, so you have to wait anywhere from, you know, recommended 4 to 72 hours for the whole world to get the record, right? Or it could be because my DNS server is failing. Okay, so if my DNS server is failing, then what you want to do is you want to start troubleshooting the DNS server. If it's out of your control, then you need to find the DNS server provider and then get that fixed. If it's in your control, you need to just go to DNS and figure that out. Okay. So another thing inside DNS that you want to look at, and this is less to do with mail flow, but it's a holistic approach to viewing DNS, is what we want to do is we want to also look at CNAME records, and we want to look at SPF records, right? Why do we want to look at CNAME records? Okay, for CNAME records, is it CNAME? Okay, what you want to do is you want to an example CNAME record that we're going to need to configure is going to be AutoDiscover. AutoDiscover needs to point to some kind of Exchange server. In a cloud-only environment, it would point to autodiscover.outlook.com. So how does that look for 2C517.info? Well, we know that if we're using 2C517.info, that it should have an AutoDiscover record. So that would look like so. And there should be a CNAME record for 2C517.info. So we see here, I'm looking for AutoDiscover. I set the type to CNAME. I'm looking for AutoDiscover record for autodiscover.2c517.info. And this could be anywhere. So let's say we're doing company.com. It should be autodiscover.company.com. Then it's going to go to this server, and it's going to, and it does get an answer. So your answers can be authoritative or non-authoritative. Non-authoritative is fine. You know, non-authoritative sounds like it's bad, but it just means that, you know what, I wasn't authoritative, but I did go out to the internet and I looked for it and I found it because I didn't respond to you with a failure. So, and what I found out in my searching is autodiscover.2c517.info does have a CNAME, you know, which is short for canonical name. I'm just going to call it CNAME. It does have the CNAME record, and that's supposed to point to mail.2c517.info, and then it does the lookup for you. Mail.2c17.info is actually this number. Okay, so again, the CNAMEs will usually be name pointing to another name. Okay, a record will usually be name pointing to an IP address. The reason we have CNAMEs is it's just easier to have one record pointing to one IP address and then having a whole bunch of CNAMEs pointing to that one record. So this is my main record, but Exchange itself is looking for autodiscover, so that's why I create an autodiscover.2c517.info CNAME to point to this, which eventually points to this. And why is that needed? That's needed for Outlook connectivity. The reason that you can open up Outlook for the first time, it asks you for the email address and password. And what happens is it takes your domain name, it slaps autodiscover in front of it, and then it does an autodiscover record, and then it finally goes here to configure the rest of your Outlook without you putting like Exchange server name, if you're using RPC over HTTP proxy, your proxy name and so on and so forth. You don't need to know all that, right? You just need to know your email address and your password. The benefit to the administrator is the end users can set up Outlook on their own. Okay, so that's the one of the CNAME records that's needed. It doesn't really affect mail flow. However, it's important for Outlook to connect, and therefore, if Outlook connects, then you can start, then therefore people can do mail flow, right? Or you can, of course, use OWA, and then you don't need the autodiscover record. Whether using OWA or Outlook, one thing that you might run into then is going to be what we call the SPF record. So the SPF record is a record that's used to verify what servers you can send from. Okay, so again, recap the MX record. The MX record is for the internet. Anybody on the internet to ask, where do I send mail to? That's the MX record. The SPF record is for everybody on the internet again, but it tells everyone on the internet where should mail be coming from. So if I'm sending, my SPF record should contain one of the IP addresses that I'm sending from. Okay, so the SPF record is a text record, so we have to change the type in NS lookup, and the set type is going to be TXT, and if we do the TXT for 517.info, we're going to see my SPF record. You can tell it's SPF record if you see SPF1 right underneath it, and again that would include spf.outlook.com. Okay, that's my SPF record. Because I'm a cloud-only environment, all of my SPF record, all of my servers that I'm going to be sending from is going to come out of Outlook.com, which is the Office 365 environment, and that would be everything. Okay, we can find other environments, and let's say look at Microsoft.com. What does Microsoft.com? Again, because I'm internal to Microsoft, I'm not going to be able to pull up what our records are. But if I was outside in an outside environment, I would be able to test that. Okay, so those are your 3 different records. The 3 different records are going to be your MX record. We did the set type equal MX. Your CNAME record, set type equals CNAME, or text record, which is your SPF record. Your SPF record, which is a text record, TXT record, and you do that by doing set type equals TXT. Okay, and how do I know all that? Well, I know that because if you go to the portal, and just for anybody out there, if you happen to forget, well, how do I know these records? How do I remember where they're at? Well, it's listed in your Office 365 portal. So if you go to portal.office.com, okay, you're going to be able to get to your Office 365 Admin Center. Okay, and here I'm actually already here, but if you do get to the screen, you want to go to the admin, and that will take you to your Office 365 Admin Center. Okay, inside your Office 365 Admin Center, you want to go ahead and go to Domains, and then inside Domains, you're going to have all your domains that are set up. In this case, I only have the 2, right? The default one, which is our Microsoft Online domain record, and that's always going to be something.microsoft.com. Okay. In my case, it's just my name, Andy Punt. On Microsoft.com, but then also it's going to have any vanity domains. You know, we call this the vanity domain because this is the pretty domain. This is the one that you want to send to. Very rarely are you going to tell your customers, you know, very rarely are you going to have your end users who are on Office 365, they're not going to tell their customers, oh, send email to me at whatever.onmicrosoft.com. They're going to say, oh, it's whatever at company.com, whatever your company, the end user's company name is. And in this case, that would be 2c517.info. Under 2c517.info, again, the question is, well, how do I know what all those records are? If I go here, again, Office 365 Admin Center, to domains, inside domains, we have your vanity domain. You click on your vanity domain, then you go to domain settings. Inside domain settings, here, we can see all the information about 2c517.info. We can see one that is managed outside of Office 365. Okay. Mm-hmm. We can also see that it's being used for, the main purpose is being used for Exchange Online and Link Online. And therefore, if we view the DNS records, we can see all the records that are needed for Exchange Online, for Skype for Business, and additional Office 365 records. So therefore, you would have to go to your DNS zone and your DNS provider. You know, in my case, I just went to my provider and I set up all of these records. Okay, and again, we don't have to worry about these too much because they're related to other functions of Office 365, and we're focusing on just Exchange Online. Remember, what did I just talk about? We talked about the MX record. That MX record should be a priority of 0, but again, if you only have one record, it doesn't matter. You can set up as 100. Right? It doesn't matter because you only have the one. It's always going to return that one. So the MX record for 2c517.info should be this. If I go back to here, I go to my MX record for 2c517.info. It's this right here, 2c517-info.mail.protection.outlook.com. We see that it matches here. Again, my environment is a little bit different because I do have a hybrid environment. I do have my mail going to my on-premise first, and there's a reason for that because we're doing a demo. But for the sake of most cloud-only environments, you will want to send straight to here. Okay. What else did we talk about? We talked about the CNAME record. If I go back to my example, we set type to CNAME. My CNAME record for autodiscover.domain.com, in my case 2c517.info, is a CNAME for this, and it points to this. Again, in my case, it is a hybrid environment, so therefore it's going to look a little bit different. But let's go to a cloud-only environment. I do have a cloud-only environment. CC417.biz. You can see here, it is pointing to only that with the MX preferences 0, right? Okay, and I'm also going to show you the CNAME, right? For 2C, it should be autodiscover.2c517.biz, and that will be, again, what is it supposed to point to? It's supposed to point to autodiscover.outlook.com. It points to autodiscover.outlook.com. Okay, see how that works? And then finally, the SPF record. It's a text record. So 2c517.biz. Oops, got to spell it right. It's pointing to this. Well, where did I get that? Again, I get it from the Office 365 Admin Center. Okay, so that is our text record. Okay, so all of those are going to be configured should be configured properly before your mail is going to flow right.
Okay, so for cloud-only environments, typically that is the default setup. You only have those 3 records. You have the MX record, which tells the world this is where you need to send mail to. When you want to send mail to my domain, you do that through the MX record. The CNAME record, that's the auto-discover record, that tells the clients where to connect to configure themselves. And obviously a client that's unable to connect cannot send mail, so that could be a reason why they can't send mail, is because they can't connect. and then the SPF record is the record that tells the world that these are the authoritative servers that is allowed to send mail on my behalf, and so you can trust them when I do that. So it's pretty critical that we ensure that those records are configured correctly, and as Andy's shown you, with NS lookup you can verify those things, and you can verify that your DNS is working properly and that mail is working. Okay, so when we configured DNS correctly, we verify the DNS is working well, then our next section would be on troubleshooting client connectivity. And when we look at client connectivity, obviously that is where the mail originates. A client connects to Exchange Online and sends a mail. So sometimes we need to troubleshoot that client connectivity. We know that DNS is fine, but we need to move on to client connectivity. So Andy, can you take us through some tools that we have to troubleshoot client connectivity?
Yes. So just to track back to what we stated earlier, stating that if you are having issues with mail flow, it's always best to go right to OWA and see if OWA is having issues. So let's say you're using both OWA and Outlook, and either you're having issues with one or the other. There's just going to be times where you're going to need to be able to troubleshoot Outlook connectivity as well to see if that could be your problem. And so in a way it seems like we're going to step out of the whole mail flow troubleshooting, and we're going to go into client connectivity, which seems to be out of the context of what we're trying to do here. But client connectivity is important and relevant to mail flow troubleshooting, so it would be a disservice for us not to touch base on client connectivity for a little bit. So essentially, just with the scoping basics we talked about before, we want to go through the scoping basics and determine, is Outlook affected? Is OWA affected? And once we figure out that we need to troubleshoot Outlook, we want to go ahead and go into Outlook troubleshooting and determine, asking the same basics, whether is this one user affected, is this a group of users affected, or if it's going to be the whole organization that's affected. Once you figure that out, what you want to do is you want to just test this yourself. You want to be able to go into Outlook and see if you're having any problems with Outlook. So very first thing you want to do is, if we take a look at my screen, we'll just go ahead and go right into Outlook. Very simply, the easiest way to troubleshoot Outlook will be right at the bottom of Outlook. We want to look where we see right here, connected to Microsoft Exchange. If you don't see connected to Microsoft Exchange, then you're going to have problems. Then this will be your error troubleshooting. You might not need to troubleshoot transport rules or mail flow at this point in time, but if you're not connected to Microsoft Exchange here in Outlook, you're not going to be able to send messages. And one symptom of that is if we go into Outlook and go into your folders, you're going to see your outbox. Your outbox normally is supposed to be empty. Now, if you're having problems with connected to Microsoft Exchange, so let's make it look like we're not connected. So if you're working offline, it's going to say you're working offline. This would be, whenever when you have Outlook open and you're not using, you don't have an internet connection. So to prevent Outlook from keep on trying, you might want to change this to working offline. So when you purposely want it to be offline, it's going to say working offline. Well, when you're accidentally offline, it's going to say trying to connect, or it's going to say disconnected. Okay, so those, in a way, this will give us the same symptoms of stuff showing up in the outbox, but for the sake of, just to make sure that we're clear, if you're purposely working offline, it'll say working offline, and if you're accidentally offline, it's going to say either trying to connect or disconnected. Okay. So in this case, if I was to send something and I was in the trying to connect or disconnected state, so let's say I wanted to send something to demo B at 2c517.info to another user. Okay. As you can see, once I click on send, I am in the outbox. So just to make it more clear, right now you can see I'm in the outbox. The outbox is going to eventually, it's going to grow. I'm going to try to send another message. I'm not sure what happens actually if I send it to myself. I'm pretty sure it actually will not send. Even if you're sending to yourself, it needs to notify the server that, hey, I'm sending a message so I can do the scans or whatnot. But test itself. Again, your outbox is just going to grow and grow and grow. Again, right now we see it says working offline, but this is going to happen even if it says trying to connect or disconnected. Okay, so what you need to do then is you need to figure out why you're disconnected. So what happens when you get reconnected? Outlook is pretty resilient. I go to working offline, and now I'm connected to Microsoft Exchange. I go to Microsoft Exchange, it's going to send 202, and therefore the messages just go out. Okay? So again, Outlook is pretty resilient. It's going to do what it needs to do in order to get mail flow going again. Okay, so for troubleshooting purposes, again, the advanced troubleshooting is going to be definitely outside of the context of what we're trying to do here, which is mail flow troubleshooting. But for both for basic mail flow troubleshooting and for Outlook troubleshooting, we actually have tools on the internet that will help us do that, right? The very first tool that I want to go to and I want to just show people is the mail flow guided walkthrough. Okay, the mail flow guided walkthrough is actually going to do that. It's going to walk you through, well, can I say, what is my problem? To begin with, you need to determine, okay, what the issue is. Remember, through scoping basics, we determine how many users are affected and is it outgoing or ingoing. The guided walkthrough is going to be able to help you ask those questions, and then it will help you, okay, well, who's affected? Well, the people that are affected are both in Office 365, then obviously I would choose this one. If the sender mailbox is outside and the recipient mailbox is inside Office 365, that means you're trying to get mail into Office 365, you select this. So for instance, I select on this, then for instance, it'll keep on asking you more questions until it finally gets to a solution. So let's say my problem is I'm just completely not able to receive mail from outside. I click on that. Well, is this for a single user or many users? Let's say it's many users. Well, this is going to tell you, hey, chances are you might have a service incident. Okay, and it's going to walk you through to, checking to see if you have a service incident. Okay, and then it's going to ask you a question: did this help or did it not help? If it did not, then it'll keep on going, and it'll help you again go through what I would be going through anyways. However, this is a guided walkthrough. Okay. And again, the nice thing about the guided walkthrough is you can always go back. Let's say you did check something, you're like, maybe I made a mistake. It wasn't actually everybody. I'm sorry, it was just a one user. I can go back on top here and I can just go to, this is a single user. Well, this is what I would do if it was a single user. See, you notice back, if I go back, if it's many users, it's a service incident. If it's one user, it could be one of these things. And then of course you can keep on going through that workflow. Okay, and this is the mail flow guided walkthrough, and of course we also have the Outlook guided walkthrough. Let's say you haven't, because again, this section of the training is going to be Outlook connectivity. Well, we also have an Outlook connectivity. So Outlook connectivity guided walkthrough, right here. Okay. And here in your search, just probably can pick any of them. I would most likely go to something that has TechNet in there. Any of these might send you there, but we want to go to Microsoft site just to be safe. So Outlook connectivity guided walkthrough.
So this again is a guided walkthrough that helps users to understand how to scope the problem, and it will ask you those relevant questions like you would also be asked when you phone a support engineer in Microsoft.
Yes. Yep. So here's the Outlook guided walkthrough, and it's the same thing. Once I go to the site, you would just go to Outlook connectivity, and it basically looks the same. It's going to ask you the same questions. Who is failing? How are they failing? What does it look like when it's failing? Okay. So you just answer those questions, click on whatever it is, displaying, Outlook is disconnected. You click on that. Is it at startup or is it when it's running? Just keep on answering questions, then it's going to start providing solutions.
That's nice. Okay.
Another tool that we have, and that is good to use, is going to be the Remote Connectivity Analyzer. The short name for this is going to be exrca.com. You go to exrca.com. From here, here you can actually go more in depth into the actual user, whereas the guided walkthrough will be just in general. You know, in general, is it your users or is it one user or many users? The remote connectivity analyzer, if we go to whether it's on-premise or Office 365, and by the way, you can also do link troubleshooting here, but for Office 365 mailbox, you can actually be more specific. I'm trying to troubleshoot Outlook connectivity here, right? Here, the next screen is going to ask the actual user. Okay. Let's go to actual user. You go, you know, I got demo A at 2c517.info, and here it's going to, my Microsoft account and email address is the same. And then go ahead and put in my password. And you know, just understand that this is my account that I actually do want to test. I want to verify, just so that no bots are going to, you know, just misuse our tool. And this is not case sensitive, so you know, just it sometimes is hard to read though. So just keep on trying until you can pass it. Then you actually perform the test. Once you perform the test, you can also, you know, it'll give you the results that whether it failed or disconnected. And from there, then you want to put on your, not your Mailflow troubleshooting hat, but you need to put on your Outlook, you know, connectivity troubleshooting hat, and to determine why you're having this issue. And by the way, since we're here, this is a perfect time to plug the Office 365 Support and Recovery Assistant. And the Support and Recovery Assistant tool is going to be a tool that's going to help you to diagnose. You install it on the machines that the affected user is on. You actually, you would go to it, you would install it, you would run it, putting in the credentials of the user, and then putting in the credentials of the user is going to test it from that machine. When you're using EXRCA, or the Remote Connectivity Analyzer, it's testing that user from the cloud. The SARA tool, or the Support and Recovery System tool, is a nice tool because it allows you to test that user from the user's workstation. Now we're getting even closer to the user to be able to determine what issues the user is having. And finally, the last thing I actually want to cover when we're doing these tests, we also got to be familiar with when you're connecting to Office 365 and the new flavor of, you know, Exchange, which is Exchange 2013, we actually have two flavors, which is the MAPI over HTTP connectivity and a little bit more seasoned RPC over HTTP connectivity. You want to separate the two and be able to see, you know, if your users are supposed to be connected to MAPI over HTTP, make sure that works. If they're supposed to be connecting via RPC over HTTP, you want to make sure that connects. And again, our EXRCA will actually test both. And by the way, the SARA tool that we have will also be able to check that as well. So with that, you know, that's essentially the major tools that we use: the guided walkthroughs, the Outlook itself, you know, to see if it's disconnected or trying to connect, and then also the EXRCA tool, which also points you to the SARA tool, which is a great local tool that will allow you to test the user on their machine.
So client connectivity is really important to make sure that people are able to connect. They can send those emails. These different tools will, even using Outlook specifically, you can gather if there's anything wrong with your configuration. You can also use these external tools that allows you to do some scoping, because you can determine if like the remote connectivity analyzer is able to connect to Outlook. At least you know that it's not something with the service. The service is up and running and it's available. It might be something on the client, so that's a good way of divide and conquer, where you can determine whether the problem is external to that user. And then when you get to that local machine, you can use the Office tools specifically on that machine that you install, and it will make those connections from that machine, and you can determine if there's any issues on that machine. So let's move on to the next section, where we're going to look at troubleshooting and using NDR information, that very valuable information inside of a delivery receipt, and which will show you if there's any problems. So Andy, what is the NDR?
Okay, so an NDR is essentially a non-delivery report. It's going to be a report that's given to a end user whenever they send an email message that goes out and it doesn't come back. usually when you send a message, what's going to happen is you're going to send a message out to whatever recipient, whether it's internal to your environment or it's external to your environment, whether it's inside Office 365 or outside Office 365. What's going to happen is your mail server, that where your mailbox resides, is going to be responsible for trying to get that message out, and is going to do as best as can for roughly by default about 2 days. It's going to go out and try to find via DNS and MX record searches all the way to connecting to the receiving end, and then trying to deliver a message. And in trying to do so, it's going to keep on making that attempt, but eventually at some point, whether it figures it out right away within a couple seconds, or it could be after after almost the 2-day default, if the message delivery fails, what's going to happen is you're going to get the NDR. Again, it's a non-delivery report saying that, hey, I'm a server, I got this message, I tried to send a message, and I just couldn't send it, hence the NDR. Usually this NDR message will contain all the information that you need in order to determine what the issue was. In theory, the NDRs, depending on what email service you use and what server actually generated the message, it should tell you what the problem was. And again, depending on who wrote that message, it could be considered easy for an end user to figure out themselves, or in some cases, the end user will contact the email administrator, who will then ask for that NDR so that they can read it, so that they can see what codes are in there and then see what message that code meant. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and just take a look at one of these NDRs. If we look at my screen, I already have a test account set up, and in this test account, again, let's just pretend that this is a test user that is using Office 365, and in Office 365 they're trying to send an email to a couple users and it's failing. Mm-hmm. And of course, we always go to the scoping basics. We always ask the basics that we have been stating already, that how many users are affected, how many, is it a group of users, is it all the users, is it to one domain, is it the email coming in, is it the email going out. Once you clear some of those basics, then we can start looking at some of the data that the user has. So in this case, we found out that it's just one user, and this one user is trying to send to a user out in a domain that's out on the internet, and he's getting NDR. So what we want to do is we want to either go to the user or ask the user to forward to us. In this case, we're going to the user, and I'm going to user demo A right here. And I can open up his Outlook. So you can actually do this with Outlook or OWA, especially with the new flavors of it. I'm looking at I'm looking at Outlook right here, but we'll also, we can see it in OWA right here. I logged into the Demo A account right here. If I go to Mail, an email message coming in is an email message coming in is an email message coming in. It's essentially going to be the same thing. So what I use here, I actually think it would be cleaner to read in Outlook, so I'll go back to Outlook. And inside Outlook, what I did was I did a couple tests just to show you that NDRs can come and they can look very differently depending on who the generating server is. And we'll go a little bit into what a generating server is, but before we do that, I just wanted to see the different flavors. So what I did here was, as a user, as demo mailbox A, I tried to send to a user. So the user that I sent to was in a Microsoft service, but this is Outlook.com, which is our consumer product. Which is the free consumer product. I should also mention. Yep. But obviously this should be a bad address, 567, right? I just had to pick an address out there that I knew would be bad at Outlook.com, and when you send to that, I got this message back almost right away stating that this is delivery status notification, just another official name for NDR, and it says right here, delivery following recipients failed. Okay, did not give too much information. Okay, just because.
It looks like there is a user that's got a little bit of experience would figure out what it means, but sometimes users don't even know what a recipient is, and so then they would call. Right.
And as somebody with experience and an administrator, you're going to be able to see that chances are, even if I didn't put this address in correctly, this obvious. Let's say it was just say we use a name such as John Smith, and it looks same, but there might not be a John Smith, or instead of John Smith, it's supposed to be John. His email address isn't john.smith. It's actually john@outlook.com. Those could be issues. That could be the issue as well. So it's knowing and just probing and asking the right questions. So I wanted to show another type of NDR, and right here we have the in this NDR. This is the NDR to a non-Microsoft server, non-Microsoft service, right? In this case, I use yahoo.com. Again, I probably could have used a different example where the email address is a little bit less obvious, but right here you see test KDNFI. This is not a user, obviously. So what does yahoo.com say about the message? It says, well, it could not be delivered because the recipient's email system, which is going to be yahoo.com, reported the following error. Okay, this user does not have a yahoo.com account. Okay, that basically either you emailed the wrong user or you misspelled it. Okay, and then it gives you a little bit more information of what email server gave you the message. Okay, again, this is how Yahoo decides to do their NDRs. Okay, and then they also give the raw information right here, which is called the message header, and we'll go into message headers a little bit into the next lesson. But for now, we're just going to focus on the NDR, which includes the message header. Okay.
Wow. So this has got a lot more information.
Right. So now let's go from a non-Microsoft server. Let's go to a Microsoft server, more specifically to Office 365. Okay. I opened up a Office 365. NDR, and this is a new type of feature that we have in Office 365. Again, one of the benefits of having Office 365 is we're always trying to make it better, and not only are we trying to make it better, but you're going to get better faster. Okay, so one of the things that just came out recently, I would say within the past 6 months, we got. This is called the Enhanced NDR. The Enhanced NDR is going to be a little bit more colorful, I should say. It's going to show you, it's going to tell you a little bit more in user-friendly language that your message to this user could not be delivered. This user wasn't found at Microsoft.com, and the issue is, or the action that's required is on the demo A side. Obviously, if it was an Office 365 issue, the red would be right here, right? And if it was the issue on the recipient end, you'd see the red be on this side, right here.
Okay.
Okay. And then, in addition to that, this is where the bonuses, or this is where the gravy is, right? This is the extra. This is how to fix it. Now, imagine if your end users actually were able to get this and actually see this, and then they can fix it themselves. Us as an administrator, it makes our lives a lot easier, because now the end user doesn't need to call us for these types of issues, and they can go and figure it out themselves. However, 9 out of 10 times there's a good chance that the end user is still going to call the admin, because just for that full service to make sure that it is it isn't a service issue. But again, if just seeing this, it's we can see it's in bold and a different color. They should be able to tell that, hey, did I really type the right address? Is this really the right user? Okay. And again, this is one of the articles that we can use to talk about NDR codes. Nope, looks like I cannot open this URL, so let me try to copy it. I will paste it in here. Okay, and this is a great article to tell you about the error that the user got, and then also it will just give you remediation steps as well on how to fix.
Yeah, nice detailed steps on things to try.
Yes. Okay. Here's another NDR that I think is very valuable. We should talk about this as well, but whenever you get NDR to the older Exchange, or in this case, it's my on-premise Exchange environment, right? My on-premise Exchange environment does not have that enhanced NDR. It doesn't have the how to fix it area of it. It doesn't have the the nice picture in there to tell me how where the issue happened. It's just pretty raw information. It's not at the rawest level. The rawest level would be strictly the message headers, but this is pretty raw in the sense that it just tells you delivery has failed to this email address because the email you entered could not be found.
Okay.
Okay. In this example, this is a little bit more harder to figure out, because the user I'm trying to send to is test 2008. Well, I know because I'm an administrator of this domain as well, that there is no test 2008. It's actually test 2007.
Okay.
So I just changed it a little bit, but again, this could just give you an example of how to troubleshoot the issue. So again, this is some of the NDRs that we can get in different situations. But for every single NDR, except for this one NDR that goes to Outlook.com, every NDR you're going to have the raw information. And inside this raw information, there's a couple things that you do want to look for, and outside of what it says at the top. But as an administrator, you want to kind of break it down as much as you can and get to the ones and zeros. In order to do that, there's just several things that we need to look at. One thing that I'll even take the Yahoo one because I know that it's in their NDR as well. One thing we're looking for is the generating server. Okay, the generating server will tell you, I went from me to wherever, but I finally got here, and that's when I got the issue. So when I finally got to here being, this is one of our servers. So one of our servers, because I noticed it says Outlook.com, it tried connecting to this server, but then this server stated, remote service return, this user does not have a Yahoo.com account. So the generating server is important because we can then confidently know that, I got here. Okay. If you see the generating server is a server outside the environment, then it's completely out of your hands. Then you definitely have to check with outside your service. However, in this case, it's still right here. Our reporter reported it, but it reported because the recipient server said there was no user found. Okay. Another one. I'll switch over back to our enhanced NDR, and you'll see we'll have the actually they covered up the generating server, it looked like, but we do have it. Let me open it up.
Generated by.
Yes, generated. So they just made it look a little bit nicer. Okay, but again, same concept. DSN generated by generating server. Okay. We want to add to that is also diagnostics. The diagnostics being what other information that you have. For us, this would be the diagnostics, right? The message hops. What did it do? It went from here to here, here to here, here to here. Okay. So what we're doing was just trying to determine what happened as it went out. Okay. Codes are important. We want to make sure that when we look at these issues, we'll also get the code. The codes will also help us to determine what type of issue is going on. So the code here, we actually hide the actual code, but the reported error from that code is recipient not found.
Okay.
So let's see if the code is actually. No, the code would not be inside here, okay, because this is a message header. The message header is information that actually describes the message as opposed to a response from a generating server. Okay, and then other than that, something else that might be important that is in the message headers, but here in the enhanced NDR is relay time. Seeing how long messages took to get from here to here, or actually from here to here, and then from here to here, and then from here to here, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So that is pretty much the NDRs and the information that you would try to glean from it. And again, depending on codes, depending on what issues you might have, you just have to follow the issue, follow where the data leads you. Search the internet, look for the codes, and maybe people will have solutions for those codes already that will help you determine how to resolve your issue.
Yeah, so it looks like some organizations do set up their NDRs to look quite nice, and some of them don't, and they just return a error code, and that error code might mean something quite cryptic, and you can just search online. You can go and find what that code means. Usually a a code that is that starts with a 3 means that this is a temporary error. It could tell you that there's a delay or something like that happening. It's just a warning that this message wasn't delivered yet. It's going to take a while. I'm trying. And then error 400 could be a more permanent, or 500 a failure error that it couldn't deliver that message. So again, there's great articles out there that will show you what those error codes mean, and sometimes you have to go to that other product. So if it's a commercial email service, some of the consumer services out there, they might have special codes that will designate what it means, and you can go and look on their support websites to find that information. So it looks like the NDR message is actually a really valuable tool and place where you can find information on mail flow issues. And so my recommendation to a lot of people is always start with the NDR. If you have an NDR, sometimes you don't have an NDR, but if you have an NDR, that's the best place to start your troubleshooting process.
And actually, just to, looking at my screen again, I can show you that, for instance, if we have the NDR from a code, what would I do with this code? So I'm looking at an Exchange on-premise, and this would be, most of the servers out there will be able to generate a code for you. And let's say I take this code. Well, what does this code mean? This is, let's say if you just had the code and you didn't, or we have a code and it has an error that really doesn't describe much. This one is pretty clear, black and white. Just recipient not found. But let's say you do have a code and you don't know what that code is. So let's say you have something like a 550.511 and you didn't know what it meant, recipient not found. Just very simply, what you want to do is you can do a simple search on the internet, and then you just using any of the search results and determine what you are looking for, or you can narrow it down a little bit more, and you want to trust Microsoft and use Microsoft. Well, Microsoft should be able to, there's a lot of examples here to tell you, like for instance, here's the 55511, but let's say you did have the 571. What does that look like? Okay, so we go to the technet.com, and here's one way that you can resolve a 571 error, unable to relay for this domain. Again, at this point in time with your searching, you might want to just go ahead, just throw in a code in there. So here's another type of code that is pretty common, and that is going to be the NDR. And let's put 4.4.7, another common error. Well, what does that mean? Okay, well that's right here. Okay, and then you can read and for instance, this will help you in your troubleshooting. Okay. Another great place to go to for just information on all the codes, if you go ahead and just do a general Bing search. If you open up Bing, that's my search engine of choice, and just very simply you can go to Bing, and then you want to look for NDR codes. Okay, or more specifically, let's look for the Microsoft article. So give me 1 second. I will look for that code. I think, what are Exchange NDR in Exchange Online? Okay, so we actually have a great article right here on what are NDRs, and essentially this blog covers everything that we just talked about right now with NDRs. How to get NDRs, how to read the different portions of NDRs, the tips, and then the diagnostics information, which is the part that contains the message headers, and then also talks about the different parts. We talked about the generating server. We talked about the looking at the actual recipient. We looked at looking at the original message headers, which we'll cover shortly in full. But then also how to interpret them, right? Again, looking for generating server. Okay, and then finally, based on the different codes, the codes are going to usually fall somewhere between 447 and 57999. Okay, this going to right here and determining, okay, well, I got a 57999. This is what you probably need to do to fix that issue.
Okay, wow, that's really valuable information. So when we look at NDRs, great insight into why that message was not delivered. And starting with that, if we dissect that NDR and we see that there's information in there that can give us information on what is wrong.
And the next piece that we're going to cover is going to be message headers, and we're going to cover that in the next module, as well as the extended trace message tracing, both the standard and the extended message trace. We're going to also cover high risk delivery pool and why messages would go out the high risk delivery pool, and then most importantly, one of the best tools that we have out there is just a simple tool called Telnet.
Okay.